As immigration policies tighten across Europe, many countries are now sending immigrants back at an unprecedented rate. Economic struggles, political shifts, and rising nationalism have led governments to enforce stricter border controls and deportation measures. But which nations are leading the charge in 2025? Today on Globe Discoveries, we're counting down 10 European countries that are actively deporting immigrants. From changes in asylum laws to large-scale deportation efforts, these nations are making it clear that they are no longer as welcoming as they once were. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Number 10. Denmark. Denmark, often celebrated for its high quality of life and progressive social policies, is now making headlines for its strict immigration stance. The Danish government has intensified its efforts to send back asylum seekers, particularly those from Syria, following a policy change in 2024. Authorities declared parts of Syria safe for return, despite concerns from human rights organizations. The Danish Immigration Service reported a 35% increase in residency permit revocations in 2025 compared to the previous year. In Copenhagen, protests erupted as dozens of families faced deportation despite having lived in the country for years. For these families, the sudden shift in policy came as a cold, bureaucratic shock. The government's rationale. Officials argue that the nation must prioritize resources for its native population and limit the strain on social services. This policy aligns with Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's goal to reach zero asylum seekers in the coming years. Yet critics warned that these measures may tarnish Denmark's global reputation. As deportations increase, many Syrian refugees are left with an impossible choice: return to a war-scarred homeland or face indefinite detention. For now, Denmark remains firm in its resolve, with more deportation flights scheduled for the months ahead. The impact of these policies extends beyond the immigrant population, as Danish society grapples with the ethical and social implications of these decisions. As the government doubles down on its stance, the world watches closely to see how this small Nordic nation navigates its controversial path forward. Number 9. Greece. Greece, historically a key entry point for migrants arriving in Europe, has shifted its stance dramatically in 2025. With a record number of deportations already completed this year, authorities are clamping down on illegal immigration while streamlining returns under EU agreements. The Greek government claims these efforts aim to restore order after years of overwhelming arrivals. One primary driver behind this change is the significant rise in border apprehensions. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, more than 20,000 individuals were detained and subsequently deported. The majority were sent back to countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. The government attributes the crackdown to growing domestic pressure. Greek citizens have increasingly voiced concerns about strained infrastructure, particularly in Athens and Thessaloniki. Politicians responded with a raft of policies, including fast-track deportation processes and increased surveillance at land and sea borders. Despite these efforts, humanitarian organizations warned that some deportations violate international protection laws. Yet Greek officials maintain that the measures are necessary to maintain public order and economic stability. Public sentiment remains deeply divided, with some celebrating the new policies and others protesting what they see as human rights violations. As Greece navigates this complex issue, the outcomes will likely shape future immigration strategies across southern Europe. Number 8. Finland. In 2025, Finland has unexpectedly emerged as one of Europe's most assertive deporting countries. Known for its peaceful image, the Nordic nation has adopted a more hardline approach, especially toward migrants who entered during the 2015 refugee crisis. The Finnish Immigration Service reported a 42% rise in deportation cases within the first half of this year. The shift is largely driven by concerns over national security and economic pressures. Authorities have pointed to increased criminal activity among certain migrant populations as justification for the crackdown. In Helsinki, new legislation passed in early 2025 has granted police greater powers to identify and expel undocumented immigrants. Additionally, Finland has forged new repatriation agreements with Iraq and Somalia. The goal? To accelerate returns while discouraging further illegal arrivals. Prime Minister Riikka Purra has openly stated that immigration policies must prioritize those who contribute to Finnish society. However, the policy shift hasn't been without backlash. Critics argue that the narrative surrounding immigrant crime has been exaggerated, fueling societal divisions. Yet, for now, Finland remains steadfast in its commitment to deportations. The broader implications of this policy are now becoming evident as communities face challenges integrating newcomers while enforcing strict deportation orders. As Finland continues its crackdown, international observers are monitoring the situation closely. Number 7. Austria. Austria has adopted a zero-tolerance policy toward illegal immigration in 2025. The government has ramped up deportation flights to North Africa and the Middle East, with an emphasis on individuals denied asylum or convicted of criminal offenses. Interior Minister Gerhard Karner described the initiative as essential to safeguard Austrian identity. The statistics tell a clear story. More than 15,000 individuals have been sent back this year alone. Many were detained during workplace raids or routine document checks. Vienna has become a focal point for these operations, as the city houses the largest immigrant population in the country. The government has also introduced stringent sponsorship requirements for residency applications. This move aims to dissuade prospective migrants from seeking refuge in Austria. Officials argue that the system is unsustainable without significant reform. On the streets, the impact is palpable. Community groups report increased fear among migrant families, many of whom now avoid public spaces to evade detection. Meanwhile, Austria continues to bolster border controls to prevent unauthorized returns. As the policy unfolds, debates about the balance between national security and humanitarian obligations intensify. The long-term effects on Austria's social fabric remain uncertain. Number 6. Italy. Italy's immigration policies have taken a sharp turn in 2025 under Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's administration. Once a primary gateway for migrants crossing the Mediterranean, the country has intensified efforts to deport those deemed unlawfully present. Deportations have surged by 50% compared to last year. The Italian Coast Guard has been instructed to intercept and return migrant boats more aggressively. Offshore detention centers have also seen increased activity as authorities fast-track asylum decisions. New bilateral agreements with North African nations have simplified return procedures. In Rome, officials stressed the importance of these measures to preserve social cohesion. The influx of immigrants has long strained public resources, from healthcare services to housing availability. Consequently, the government has vowed to curb unauthorized arrivals by any means necessary. However, humanitarian groups argue that Italy's methods violate international refugee conventions. Still, with public support largely favoring the crackdown, the deportation drive shows no signs of slowing down. The response from Italy's immigrant communities has been one of fear and uncertainty. Many now live with the daily risk of deportation, unsure of what the future holds. Number 5. Belgium. Belgium has quietly but effectively escalated its deportation efforts in 2025. Recent amendments to immigration laws have empowered officials to expedite returns without prolonged legal battles. The government cites national security and social cohesion as primary motivators. In Brussels, new immigration courts were established to handle deportation cases within weeks. This has led to a 38% increase in repatriations since January. Most deportees hail from countries like Morocco, Algeria, and Guinea. The policy shift follows public dissatisfaction with rising crime rates and overburdened welfare programs. Prime Minister Alexander De Croo emphasized that those who contribute are welcome. Those who don't must leave. As a result, thousands of migrants with expired or fraudulent documentation have already been expelled. Nevertheless, NGOs have condemned the expedited processes, labeling them as inhumane and legally questionable. Despite the criticism, Belgian authorities remain adamant about restoring orderly migration management. The long-term success of these policies remains uncertain, as Belgium faces ongoing challenges in integrating migrants who do meet residency requirements. Number 4. Poland. Poland has significantly tightened its immigration policies in 2025, with deportations reaching unprecedented levels. The Border Guard Agency reported a 60% increase in removals compared to the previous year, focusing primarily on individuals from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Officials cite national security concerns as the driving factor. New laws passed earlier this year now allow law enforcement to conduct spot checks at workplaces and public events. As a result, more than 25,000 undocumented migrants have already been expelled. Warsaw has become the epicenter of this enforcement surge. Economic pressures also play a role. The Polish government claims that undocumented immigrants contribute to wage suppression in low-skilled sectors. Consequently, industries like agriculture and construction have seen increased labor inspections. Community organizations have raised alarms about potential racial profiling during these checks. However, the government asserts that all measures adhere to EU regulations. With upcoming elections, politicians continue to push these measures to appeal to voters who prioritize border security. The impact of these policies will likely be felt for years to come. Number 3. Germany. Germany has taken a stricter approach to immigration in 2025 as federal authorities struggle to balance humanitarian obligations with domestic concerns. Deportations have surged by 55%, with over 45,000 individuals sent back since January. Most returns involve individuals from the Balkans, North Africa, and Afghanistan. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has defended these measures, citing public frustration over increased asylum claims. New legislation has streamlined deportation procedures, reducing the time between appeals and removal. Berlin, Munich, and Frankfurt have become focal points for these operations. Statistics reveal that public sentiment on immigration has shifted. A survey from early 2025 showed that 62% of respondents support stricter deportation measures. Government officials attribute this shift to concerns about integration and crime. Migrants with job offers or family ties to German citizens are still eligible for residence permits. However, those with expired documents or rejected asylum claims face swift removal. Human rights advocates warn that these policies undermine Germany's commitment to international asylum agreements. Nevertheless, the government remains resolute in its decision. Number 2. Hungary. Hungary remains one of the most rigidly anti-immigration countries in Europe. Deportations have jumped by 70% in 2025 as authorities implement new border security protocols. Prime Minister Viktor Orban continues to champion these efforts, presenting immigration as a threat to national identity. The Hungarian border guard reported that 35,000 individuals have been removed this year alone. Most were apprehended near the Serbian border, a known migration hotspot. The government has also reinforced fencing and installed thermal imaging cameras along critical routes. Public support for these measures remains strong. Surveys indicate that nearly 75% of Hungarian citizens approve of the government's tough stance. Officials claim these policies have reduced crime and social unrest. International critics argue that Hungary disregards asylum rights. The European Court of Justice has already censured Hungary for its detention practices. Nonetheless, Orban has promised further crackdowns if migration pressures persist. For Hungary, the focus remains on border integrity. Number 1. France. France tops the list in 2025, with more than 60,000 deportations completed this year alone. The Interior Ministry attributes the increase to new policies targeting undocumented workers and individuals with criminal convictions. President Emmanuel Macron has defended these measures as necessary to preserve social cohesion. The largest numbers of deportees come from Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Police operations in Paris and Marseille have intensified, with officers conducting frequent checks in migrant-heavy neighborhoods. Economic concerns have also driven these decisions. Officials claim that undocumented migration costs taxpayers billions annually. Consequently, the government has tightened rules around work permits and social benefits. Protests against these policies have erupted in several cities. Activists accuse the government of scapegoating immigrants for broader economic issues. Despite domestic criticism, France maintains its position as Europe's most active deporting country in 2025. Here are 5 practical tips to consider if you're an immigrant in a country increasing deportations in 2025. Stay updated on immigration policies. Immigration laws can change quickly, so regularly check government websites and trusted news sources for updates. Ensure your documents are valid. Make sure your visa, work permit, or residency papers are current and renew them well before expiration dates. Know your legal rights. Learn your rights regarding immigration checks, detainment, and deportation, and keep contact information for a reliable immigration lawyer. Connect with community support groups. Local immigrant organizations often provide legal resources, advice, and emotional support for those at risk. Avoid unnecessary risks. Follow local laws strictly, avoid protests or public demonstrations, and stay aware of any areas with increased immigration enforcement activity. Immigration policy continues to evolve across Europe, with some countries choosing stricter enforcement while others seek more inclusive approaches. Which country's policy shifts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more global insights from Globe Discoveries.